So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive. In seminary, I studied Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. He was a Hasidic rabbi, theologian, and mystic who was close with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and who influenced Dr. King's theology as Heschel saw the Exodus story play out in the United States racial landscape. Heschel's sense of providence, that is, the way God worked in the lives of humans, was as a parent, a father who had sent humans, each other, to help one another. Heschel said, "We tend to read the Bible looking for mighty acts that God does and not seeing that all the way through the Bible, God is waiting for human beings to act." Now, last Sunday, I spoke about the moral imagination, a concept explored by social scientist Paul Lederach, which requires, among other things, comfort with risk as a major facet of being led by the moral imagination. It's when you can't quite see the path, yet you are still willing to walk it. Now, the summer of 2024 will be remembered, I think, as politically significant for years to come. Do you remember where you were when it was announced that Joe Biden was stepping down from his re-election campaign for president? I do. We were in the car driving across the country. We heard the news and immediately burst into tears. Emotional all day long, tearing up again later through his speech explaining that he would not run for re-election. Why were we crying, I asked aloud. I mean, we were not diehard Biden fans. By that point, our votes would clearly have lacked luster, but I could not remember a time when I had seen a politician take a political risk. Or maybe make a political sacrifice in service to a larger vision. I mean, I hadn't seen it. Maybe not in my lifetime, or not that I could remember. In that moment, the act of stepping down felt generous and personal, like he did it for us. I don't really think that's true, but that's how it felt. And in this era of political bluster and ego, of doubling and tripling down on the low moral ground, or digging deeper into violent solutions that we're seeing every day, it is nearly impossible to find a time when men who hold great power are willing to risk or acquiesce that power for a dream beyond themselves. And it reminded me of another politician who took a risk for a larger dream and paid a political price for it. And as he turns 100 years old on October 1st, I have found myself thinking a lot about Jimmy Carter and his legacy. And in fact, I recently rewatched his famous malaise speech that America found cringy, I think is the word, that he gave 3 years into his presidency in July 15th, 1979, a speech that history has declared the beginning of the end for Carter. And while that speech does contain some awkward moments of him receiving real feedback from his constituents and his political allies, and then sharing that feedback, mostly negative, on the air, it is mostly marked by his honesty about the soul of the nation and what they were feeling at that time. He describes in his speech a listening tour he took, reading some of those real responses, that people were deeply concerned about our reliance on foreign oil and taking more than our share as a nation of the world's resources, that we were contributing to an energy and an environmental crisis. But beyond these threats, He summarized what he really heard in that feedback as, and these are the quotes from the speech, a crisis of confidence. It is a crisis that strikes at the very heart and soul and spirit of our national will. We can see this crisis in the growing doubt about the meaning of our own lives and in the loss of a unity of purpose for our nation. The erosion of our confidence in the future is threatening to destroy the social and political fabric of America. In the speech, that's the end of the quote from the speech. In the speech, he also spoke against individual consumerism. He spoke about the erosion of people's trust in churches, schools, and in the news media, and the need for all Americans to each consume less and to come together to reduce energy consumption. All this back in 1979. To be honest, the speech ages very well in hindsight. I mean, Carter did have his finger on the pulse of the country. That after those brutal murders of JFK, MLK, and RFK, many Americans no longer believed in the notion of perpetual individual progress. And I think what he was trying to say is, nor should they. I wonder if he was aware of the political risk he took, thinking that he could share that kind of skepticism on national television, and that the political machine would let him get away with it. He took the risk of deep truth-telling, and he paid the political price. Now, of course, Carter's legacy was redeemed by the incredible leadership he offered to the nation and to the world in his post-presidential life, dreaming big enough to eradicate the guinea worm from this earth and to launch Habitat for Humanity, which continues to provide housing and dignity across the world. But Carter took the risk of vulnerability. For a leader, especially a white male leader, to risk showing vulnerability is such a rarity. Well, it's a game changer, really. And it's what the world needs if we are to follow our moral imagination, led by the possibilities of peacemaking, collectivism, and other big world-saving dreams. This is why I struggle to imagine how we can ever have true democracy as long as we lack term limits for senators and Supreme Court justices. Because a moral society requires leaders who are advantaged by risk and not simply status quo lifelong politicians who have forgotten to do what Carter did and maybe what Biden did too, and listen to real people and reflect what they've heard. So, what does any of this political stuff mean for your spiritual life? Last week, we began exploring these tenets of following the moral imagination, which are interconnection, curiosity, creativity, and risk. Now, personal risks are difficult enough. To make a change in your own life, to follow a big dream, that is almost more than any of us can manage in one lifetime. But a collective risk, well, that seems to live only in the realm beyond the possible. Unless a congregation decides to move as one collective and launch a new social justice project that serves the entire community. I had the chance to witness this just last week. The Unitarian Universalist congregation in Dallas just launched the Truth Pregnancy Resource Center, which is the last real pregnancy counseling center in Dallas, Texas, where pregnant people can go to be counseled on all of their reproductive options, including support and transportation if they need to travel out of state for their abortion procedures. Now, Dallas, you have to understand, has no shortage of pregnancy resource centers. They are on just about every single street corner. But they lie. They lie to pregnant people, telling them that it's illegal to travel for their abortion or that it's illegal for them to ask a provider questions about abortion at all. Now, the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Dallas just 2 months ago has seeded this new Truth Pregnancy Support Center in the location of the last abortion clinic in the state. And on my visit to Dallas last week, I was humbled by their big dream and the risk they took as a congregation to invest in and to launch a new center for support and care for pregnant people in their city. To risk alone can be unthinkable, disorienting, confusing. I mean, how? Where to begin? Many of you are already taking risks in your own family or your own community by coming to this congregation. I know it. By standing up for your beliefs or by just being your truest self and risking alienation, cutoff, or derision. Perhaps I take a risk every single day I live in Georgia and choose nonviolence as my sacred path for me and my family, settling for a beware of dog sign in a dogless home. Perhaps you take a risk every time you sign up to defend an election as a poll worker or another volunteer, walking the walk of one who upholds our democratic process as sacred. And risk is also relative, as those with more marginalized identities surely live lives with greater daily risk in a state and a nation that continues to uplift whiteness and straightness and cisgenderedness as the most powerful and legitimate. But if you do not feel a sense of risk in your own life somewhere, interrogate that privilege. Interrogate your privilege. Consider the cost of that safety to your soul's work, the causes you believe in, the people to whom you are proximate. Risk is personal and it is collective. What are we willing to risk as a congregation to do what needs to be done? We already know it is much less scary to protest together than to protest alone. And I hope we can revitalize. Very soon, you'll have the opportunity to revitalize our congregation's presence in Atlanta Pride on October 13th. I hope you'll join me. Will you join me? I hope that more of you will join all of us, not just the LGBTQ folk here at UUCA, but all of us will take to the streets together as we share our message of radical welcome to queer folks from all across the South, some of whom have traveled far, looking for people who will just celebrate and love them. And I am telling you that even in 2024, when I put on my priestly uniform, which I will do, and bless people along that parade route, folks will burst into tears of gratitude and relief and respond with, "I have never had a religious leader offer me a blessing. Not in my life could I have ever imagined this. Thank you." Even today, that will happen. Well, on October 13th, that will happen. Even in 2024, the blessing is a risk. This is the answer to Paul Lederach's ultimate question, which is, how do we transcend cycles of violence that plague our human community while still living in them? See, the peace builder must always have one foot in what is and one foot beyond what exists. Reach out to those you fear. Touch the heart of complexity. Imagine beyond what is seen and risk vulnerability one step at a time. When you are afraid, do what Rabbi Heschel's God longs for you to do and phone a friend. Invite them to sit with you in your vulnerability. Invite them to build something bold with you, even if you cannot see exactly where you're going, even if you cannot see the full resolution or revolution. We are in a unique opportunity here to build bridges across belief. Amen? Amen. We can build peace across conflict in our communities. Yes? Yes. We can build centers of truth and healing in our city. All right? All right. We can build rooms where conflict is faced and repaired head on. Oh, yes? Oh, yes. We can build interreligious dialogue. Are you with me? We can build the world we are all dreaming of if we are ready to get comfortable with risk. Then, when we are afraid, we will know we can reach towards each other and take that first step, knowing that even when we are afraid, it is always better to speak out in the name of love.